Hello and welcome to Coast AM's official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and of course, on coasttocoastam.com.
Well, up next, we're going to be talking with L.A. Marzulli, just back from Ohio. Why? He'll tell you what happened when he comes back on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. Lynn Marzulli, L.A., of course. You know L.A., the Watchers DVD series, a number of books, the Nephilim trilogy. Just on with me not too long ago. What are you doing back on already?
How are you? Evening, George. How are you?
Good to talk to you. You know, when you were on with me, you were going to Ohio for about a week. Tell us why.
Well, you know, there are a series of mounds and henges. One in particular that we spent a lot of time was the Great Circle Mound in Ohio. And, of course, the Great Circle Mound, it's a very amazing complex which goes into what's called the Octagon Mound. And if you've never, checked this thing out, go online later and look at the actual complex for yourself. It spans hundreds of acres, literally. And the Great Circle Mound really impresses me. It's a henge in the classic sense, a very large mound. It's 1,250 feet in diameter, which is the same diameter of the circle in Avebury. So this begs the question, is this just a coincidence that the actual diameter is the same, or did the same people that constructed Avebury actually come over into the Ohio Valley? And, of course, the guide I was with, Fritz Zimmerman, and I both believe that these circles were created by the same people. And here's where it gets really strange. We believe that the Nephilim constructed both circles.
Really? Now, why do you say that?
Well, the skeletons that were pulled out in the late 19th century, when the mound, this is before any type of archaeology was set as a real science.
These were burial sites, right?
Not the circle mound, but the mounds around it, correct.
Okay.
Were burial sites. And in those burial sites, they pulled out giants, the smallest ones being 7 feet, the tallest being 9 foot 9 inches.
Wow. Now, over in Cahokia, Illinois, they've got mounds there, too. Are there any similarities here, L.A.?
Well, what we see is the mounds. And, look, I'm just, we're exploring all this. A lot of the evidence has been completely obfuscated. What I mean by that is the bones are uncovered. They're given to the Smithsonian and never seen again. And we hear this case after case after case. The mounds and these, whoever built them, stretches pretty much through the Americas, even out to Catalina Island. On October 14th, I'll be going out to Catalina Island, not to see the remains of the giant bones, but to talk to the curator of a museum out there, where this gentleman in the 1920s conducted very primitive archaeological digs on the island of Catalina. And guess what? Gigantic bones were found also on Catalina. So what we believe, at least our hypothesis is that this race predated Native Americans and were here literally for thousands of years and was widespread, basically throughout the Americas.
That's amazing. Okay, now everyone get up to the coasttocoastam.com website. L.A. has provided us some pictures of this area. They are very strange and very impressive, by the way, L.A.
Thank you. Appreciate that. The one mound that we took, let me back up. When we were driving around, and there's this church, literally old church, brick building, very small, and in front of a cemetery. And right next to the church is this large mound. And we were Fritz and I walked around it and stood on it and checked it out. Again, it's like we know that at some point in time there was an excavation on the mound, but there's no record of what was found in it. And this happens all throughout the area. In a lot of cases, George, the mounds are completely taken apart, and any evidence is long gone. I mean, like maybe 100 years ago. So it's very difficult. On the other hand, we drove by a mound way back in a field, and it's amazing. It's in a high place. In other words, on top of this a plateau, and way deep in this farmer's field is this huge mound. I mean, huge, and you can see the trees growing out of it. Now, the trees growing out of course, is the last 50, 60, 100 years, whatever. The mound itself is, as far as we know, has not been excavated. And it's sort of maddening because, one wants to go in there and conduct a serious archaeological dig, but it's very difficult to get permission to do anything.
That's
when
right.
I was at the Serpent Mound last week also.
That's a pretty sacred area, isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't. You get into this whole idea of permits and trying to get a permit to do it. There was a dig at the Serpent Mound. It wasn't on the mound itself. It was slightly off of it, and they didn't find anything.
Well, then you've got to have some great justification to want to dig all over the place.
Well, absolutely. But my contention is that, look, I believe that there are giant skeletons still to be found in some of these mounds. And what would be amazing, for instance, in Paracas, Peru, we know that there are giant skeletons, and these skeletons are being displayed, openly being displayed in a museum there. David Childress and his partner went down there, and they actually have a YouTube video, and he actually handles the skulls. I mean, right in the video, and he shows the difference between the skulls. And the one skull, which is an elongated head, only has 2 plates instead of the 3 plates that human beings have, that all human beings have. So this is obviously an anomaly, this elongated skull, and yet it's there in the Paracas Museum. We hear the same exact accounts over and over again from the late 1800s into the 20th century, 1900s, where people are finding the skulls and they're elongated heads, sometimes double rows of teeth, very robust lower jaw. So these are not the typical Native American or European settlers. This is something else. And it's interesting. Fritz Zimmerman has this whole theory, and I've read his book and looked at the research, and it makes sense to me when this goes back, 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
When Joshua and Caleb are conquering the Levant, or what's known as the Promised Land, there was a mandate given for them to slay all the inhabitants of the land, which sounds crazy when you think about it. However, if the Nephilim are there, then it opens up a whole other doorway. And what Fritz believes is that some of these giants saw the slaughter, saw what was taking place, and they fled north.
And explain to some who the Nephilim may be.
Well, the Nephilim, in my opinion, and this goes with all the ancient records that I've studied, are the union, I should actually preface that by saying the unholy union of fallen angels and the women of earth, producing this spawn, as it were, which is not entirely human. And the judgment for these creatures is always the same. This is the reason for the flood of Noah, literally.
To wipe them out.
To wipe them out.
Were they pure evil?
Well, it's interesting. Even in the Americas, we get these accounts of the giants acting as cannibals. The Indians, the Native Americans were definitely afraid of them. Now, not in all cases, but we hear this over and over and over again, that certain tribes that came up to the giants or had, let's say, relations with them in any way, usually a war ensued, and the giants were eventually pushed out of the land, that type of thing. But we hear over and over again the idea of the giants being cannibals. And what's really interesting, this ties into the book of Enoch, which says that the Nephilim became cannibalistic, eating and drinking the flesh and blood of human beings. And so we see, and that book's thousands of years old, we see the same type of funny business, if I can use that word, happening in the Americas. And I find just the fact that it's there and it kind of links back to the book of Enoch, sort of sobering.
Tell me a little bit about the remains of a gateway that you two found.
Well, Fritz and I were up at this one site, and Fritz believes that this is an extremely old site. The mound was constructed of rocks, again, a high place on top of a plateau in the area. And one has to sort of imagine this area completely cleared of all trees. Even the Great Circle Mound now has all these trees growing in it, so you really can't see what it looked like. Same thing with the Octagon Mound. All the trees have grown up in the last 300 or 400 years, whatever. And so you get these enormous oak trees and maple trees and other trees. But all these sites at one time were very open and completely cleared of any type of growth. Same thing with this particular mound that we saw. It was very large and built, I would say, all of rock, at least 20 feet high, at least 20 feet high. Now, remember, we're there, and an archaeologist apparently in the last decade took a backhoe to the thing, which sounds completely crazy. So while we're there, Fritz goes, there's a rock wall that encircles this site. So we go into the woods, and sure enough, we find the remnant of the rock wall, and we start to follow it. Now, when I say a rock wall, this is, thousands of years old, and in many places it's still there, but it's over a period of time it is disintegrated. But you can follow the trail. And as we began to follow the outer ring of this circle, we came on this, what we consider to be a gateway. And we're not sure whether it's a natural rock formation or partially natural and then partially man-made, in other words, used for some sort of ceremonial, ritualistic purposes. But when you walk, and I've got a picture of it posted on your site, when you walk into this area, it forms like two walls on either side. And so you would walk up this sort of funnel into the circle. And we followed this thing, and it became sort of labyrinth-like in the sense that this formation continued, and it zigzagged from left to right all over the place and then sort of disappeared back into the woods. So we were commenting that, wow, why no one has ever done any type of a dig here. We don't know how far down the dirt and debris over, let's say, 2,000 years. We don't know where bottom is. It could be 10 feet below. There could be artifacts there. We just have no idea. But we found it fascinating. And again, all this is just laying in disrepair and in ruin.
It's right out there.
In the field. It's right out there. Yeah, you can just...
L.A., I want to talk with you about a crop formation that you spotted some 50 miles away and what the significance of that is. I'll be back in a moment. L.A. Marzulli with us on Coast to Coast AM. Well, lots going on. Next hour, of course, Bill McDonald joins us. We talk about creature forensics. That's a fascinating topic. We're going to take your calls with L.A. Marzulli as we talk about his work out there in Ohio, looking at crop formations and mounds. Incredible story there. Welcome back with L.A. Marzulli. We'll take your calls in just a second. L.A., about 50 miles from where you were in Ohio, in Chillicothe. Tell me about this large crop formation.
It's absolutely astounding. I found out about this the day before I was ready to leave, and we actually had a plane rented and everything online to get up and see it. And the lead investigator, Jeffrey Wilson, I called him, and this is where the story broke, and I asked him, is the formation still there? He said no. It was actually being, as we were speaking, it was being, that entire field of corn was being harvested. Here's the backstory on this thing. It's right near what's called the Hopewell Road, which is sort of a misnomer. Hopewell was our farmer. It really has nothing to do with these people, whoever built this thing. And this road extends from Newark, Ohio, to Chillicothe, about 50, 60 miles. And what's amazing, this thing is straight, and it goes up and over hills and down through valleys, and it begs the question, how did a primitive people make this thing thousands of years ago without any type of instruments as we know it? Here's something else to consider, and you've linked to the Crop Circle Connector site. When we look at all of these formations, I'm not talking about crop circles. I'm talking about the Great Circle Mound in Newark, Ohio, which extends then to the Octagon Mound. They are best viewed from the air. I have been in the Octagon Mound. I was actually, it's a golf course now, if you can believe it, private golf course. But last time I was there, I was granted permission, and I had a tour of it. And as you stand in that Octagon Mound, it's very difficult to see from one end to the other. That's how big it is. You could take the Great Pyramid of Giza and set it in the middle of that thing. It's a huge, huge complex, and it's best viewed from the air. So getting back on track, this crop circle appears probably about 2 weeks ago, according to investigators, in a field of standing corn. Now, what's interesting about this is most of the corn, and I went by cornfield after cornfield after cornfield, is all GMO corn. It's not the typical cornfields that you see. So the stalks are very close together. The rows are very tight. It's a very difficult formation. When I talked to Jeffrey Wilson, who is the lead investigator, he informed me, first of all, that there were no footprints in the field at all. This is a huge circle. I think he said this might be not exactly 100% accurate, but according to my notes here, he says it was the second largest formation ever found in the United States, roughly 400 feet by 700 feet. Absolutely huge. Now, get this. We all know that some of these crop circles can be made from guys with, Bob and Dave with the two planks and the rope and all this stuff, or they crush the wheat down or the rapeseed or whatever. They make a circle. With corn, it's a little more difficult. In fact, it's a lot more difficult. These stalks were about 7 feet. Most of the fields that I drove by and looked at, I would say the average is about 7 feet. Wilson informed me that The circle was made, and this is like 7 different circles with other circles spinning off of them. It's extremely complex. In fact, he said it was a very, very complex circle, one of the most complex formations he has ever seen. The crop was bent from 4 inches down from the top to 4 feet below. So
strange.
It begs the question. This is not done with human hands. Whatever is causing it, it's not done by pranksters. I mean, there's no way. And to think that someone, rape is, like a wheat field where the wheat is like 3 or 4 feet high, you can stand in that and see the guy 400 feet away. With a cornfield, you can't see a guy 10 feet away, literally.
That's right.
You can't do it. And this is what makes this thing so interesting. It's also right near the mounds in Chillicothe. It's by power lines and a good water source. And it sort of begs the question. It's like, why is this thing here? I'm absolutely blown away by this thing. And we had the plane all rented, and we were all ready to go out and take our own photographs over this thing. I really wanted to see it. The photographs on Crop Circle Connector are really worth looking at. And this thing, to me, is incredibly pristine and was basically undiscovered until someone flew over it in a private plane on the way to the Serpent Mound. In my worldview, I look at this, and it's the same guys who made those mounds thousands of years ago and in ritualistic ways are responsible for the circle. There's no way I can prove it. That's my hypothesis, but I believe that there's a definite connection.
A darn good one. Let's go to some calls. They're lining up for you, L.A. We'll go to Jane in Phoenix, Arizona, west of the Rockies, get things going. Hi, Jane. Go ahead.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Sure thing.
I've been to both Serpent Mound and Newark, and in looking at the Serpent Mound, it is 3-dimensional above the earth as an effigy mound.
Yes.
But it also follows along a river source, and so the earth, actually, the crust of the earth shows the shape of the serpent 3-dimensionally along the shape of that follows along the river. So it's 3-dimensional into the earth. And if you look at where Newark is, it's a direct diagonal over to Newark. And so in tapping into the energies over there, it felt like it was almost like the serpent is a life force energy. And energy would have come down into the serpent and shot over into Newark, which is a circle with an octagon. So you've got this masculine energy of the serpent with the circle, which is Newark, and it's in a direct diagonal line.
All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Look, it's really interesting. A lot of these sacred sites, when I use the word sacred sites, the question of, to whom are they sacred? When we go down to the plumed serpent god, Quetzalcoatl, in Chichen Itza, and by the way, I'll be down there on December 21st with Power Places Tours. That's going to be very interesting. Why is Quetzalcoatl called the plumed serpent? We see the serpent used over and over and over again. And with all due respect, and I understand where you're coming from, I have a different take on this. I believe that the serpent, and because of the human ritualistic sacrifice done at many of these sites, including the Great Circle Mound, I'm not sure about the Octagon, but definitely the Great Circle Mound in Newark, Ohio, we see ritualistic human sacrifice. We see heads, let's say, disarticulated skeletons where there is no head found in the mounds around Circle Mound. So we believe that these ritualistic sites were used to engage in human sacrifice, just like Chichen Itza was. So we see the connection with the serpent, and in my opinion, anytime you've got human sacrifice going on, this is not a good thing.
No, not at all. What do you think the message is behind some of these crop formations, L.A., all around this planet? I mean, and I agree with you. Some of them may be man-made. A lot of them are not. They're very strange. But what's the code here? What's the message?
I think the code is this. I think that they're trying to tell us, and what I mean by they is the prince of the power of the air. They're back. They're here. They're waiting for the signal to manifest openly. It's sort of a cat and mouse game. And what's amazing, here's a circle like this, and most people in the area had no idea of it. It's now it's starting to with the local newspapers now, people are starting to understand about it. But once I found about it, I was talking to different people that day. Have you heard about the crop circle down in Chillicothe? And, oh, no, what about that? Most people aren't aware of this. And we see this really, crop circles are a global phenomenon. They're happening everywhere. And Ohio has more crop circles than any other state in the union, according to Jeffrey Wilson. But most people have no idea about them. And, of course, Bob and Dave in England with the whole hoax thing, all the crop circles are done by Bob and Dave. Well, not really. I mean, there's just too many of them all over the planet. Something is going on. The prince of the power of the air is a biblical term used for the serpent. Another name, the dragon. Another name that most people know him as Satan. So and I'm not talking religious here. I'm talking about an entity that's extremely powerful and was worshipped in antiquity by these people, in my opinion. And this is what we're looking at.
Scott is in Columbus, Ohio, and now on Coast to Coast. Go ahead, Scotty.
Thank you. I was just telling your guy that I've been looking at this since I was a little kid in school, and there were so many of these mounds, over 10,000.
Yeah.
What do you think about this being their Eden, their burial place for all the giants? I mean, there's even legends of, of black-haired giants being here first and then being defeated by red-haired giants.
Red-haired giants.
You've heard of that, Lynn.
I have. And what's interesting about all this, look, we know that they're there, and there's been a deliberate cover-up by certainly the Smithsonian and other institutions to keep this away from the American people, and that begs the question, why? And in my opinion, because Darwinism is taught and is the prevailing theory, let's say, anything that would somehow bump up against Darwinism and prove that, well, this really doesn't work here because these people didn't come from the land bridge, the Bering Strait and all that. They seem to come from some other place, perhaps from, as Fritz Zimmerman, I believe, the Levant. In other words, in the biblical term, the Promised Land. Something's going on here, and it would be great to get some of these skeletons that are apparently in the Smithsonian, if they would open them up to the public and let real people take some DNA testing. Let's look at this stuff. What are they afraid of? Why can't we look at these things?
Next up, we go to Scott. Well, that was Scott. Let's go to Cornelius in Louisiana. Hey, Cornelius, go ahead.
Hey, L.A. and George.
Hey.
It's been a while, L.A. God bless you, man.
Hey, Cornelius. Good to hear your voice.
Look, I'm looking forward to seeing your Watchers 5 and any other books. I hope you have those crop circles in there.
Well, this just happened, Cornelius, and definitely not in 5, maybe in 6. But,
okay.
Very interesting.
Do you think the coming deception is coming pretty soon, L.A.? And I'll take my answer off the air.
Okay, great. I think all this is a precursor to it. Look, something is going on, and we all, while we may have different ideas,
whatever it is,
we have different worldviews as to what's going on. We can agree that it is going on. It's real. This phenomena is a real phenomena, and it's a global phenomena. It's setting people up, in my opinion, for what I call the coming great deception. That's my opinion. That's my worldview. Again, I link it back in the human sacrifice, and that's where it goes right off the graph at that point. Human sacrifice is, this isn't a benevolent entity, whatever it is.
All right, Patrick is in North Carolina, first-time caller. Go ahead, Patrick.
Glad to be on the air with you, George.
Sure
it's a great pleasure. Just wanted to comment. I grew up in northeastern Ohio and did a lot of hunting with my grandpa. And I remember going through the woods. I believe it was the Mohegan National Park. I mean, mounds all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that strikes me in particular is we were out there in the woods one day, me, my grandpa, and my dad, and we were in this, like the picture that you have on your website there. I remember there was walls, and I remember thinking, this looks like some sort of old buildings. It even looked kind of like worn steps, and it just kind of strikes me how, I mean, it's in the middle of the woods. I mean, we couldn't be the first people to come across this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just amazing.
And look, I concur. I was there for a week and saw a lot of different sites and walked on some of these areas. And this is a huge, vast complex of thousands of mounds, henges, circles, and much of it is still yet to be explored.
Sure is. L.A., are you going to go back? Any need to go back?
Yeah, well, there's all sorts of paranormal, and I use that word loosely, but paranormal activity in and around the mounds. That's one of the reasons why we held this conference. We called the conference the Nephilim Mounds Conference, and Russ Dizdar, Richard Grund, and myself were the speakers, and we like a 3-day conference. We also went out to the mounds, and Fritz Zimmerman conducted a tour on Sunday. It was just a wonderful 3 days. We'll probably hold something else in the near future there. We've just sort of cracked the surface. We had people from all over the United States, drive in, fly in, whatever, to attend the conference. But there is a high degree of demonic activity in the area. And what I mean by that is what we would call, let's say, poltergeist activity. Objects are moving, doors are slamming, TVs go on and off, electrical disturbances, and then it gets really weird. When we had one woman that called us, and we spoke to her, and she and her family lived in a house right across from the Great Circle Mound, and they disturbed the land. They were digging fence posts. They disturbed the land, and they disturbed something else with that. And they fled the house, George. This is all documented. I haven't gone public with it other than, it's not written on any of my blogs,
right.
Anything like that, but I'm talking about it now really for the first time. They fled the house because the activity there was terrifying. And whatever it was followed them. They still live in Newark, and we sort of did a deliverance over the phone. I say we, Richard Grund and myself, did this deliverance over the phone, which was very, very intense.
All right, let's go back to Chillicothe, Ohio, where you just came back from. Hi,
Sure.
John. Go ahead.
Hey, how are you guys doing tonight?
Good.
Now, I've been around this area basically my entire life, and if you're at the Scioto Trails State Park, you can actually walk a good 2 or 3 miles north if you're standing in the parking lot. You'll eventually come to the park line, and you'll come to like a little creek, and at this creek there's a big waterfall, like 12 feet, 15 feet going down. Behind this waterfall, it's small now, but you can tell where its rocks have fallen. But when you go into this cave, there are giant drawings on the top of the cave ceiling.
Wow.
And that's like 15 foot high. And I was wondering if you've ever been there, or if you'd be interested in going there.
No, I would love to go. Is it open to the public, or is this something that you've discovered on your own?
I found this on my own.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Yeah, it's off. It's not on the state park. It's actually on private property. Like, you probably shouldn't.
I would fly back tomorrow, literally.
It's too bad this didn't happen before you went out there, huh?
There you go. My email, if you go to my blog, my email is there, or just hit the link on Coast to Coast and shoot me an email, please. I'm definitely interested in that.
Get in one or two more. We'll go to Ed in Pennsylvania, east of the Rockies. Ed, thanks for calling.
Yes, thanks for taking my call, George.
Sure.
L.A. Great show. I was just wondering about the structure of the skeletons of the giants. Was there any indication if these, the nature of the weight of these things, if they were tall and lanky, or were they big and burly?
Yeah,
like Andre the Giant.
7 to 9.5 feet. But what about their makeup?
Well, according from accounts that I've read, the word robust is used over and over and over again. These were powerful. I don't want to use the word human beings. Whatever they were powerful people. If they were a hybrid, if it was Nephilim, extremely powerful. So they were. It wasn't giantism where we see sometimes where.
Long and lanky.
Yeah, or the deficiency in muscle or deformed bones. These people were very robust, and which also could account for the ability to create the circle mounds that we see in Ohio.
You know, I keep thinking about David and Goliath in the Bible.
Go.
I mean, that's it. Did they ever describe? Did the Bible ever say how tall he was?
Well, they talk about Og, who was one of the giants, Og of Bashan, and they talk about his spear, I think, weighing like, and they give I forget the exact measurement, but his bed being like over 15 feet tall.
Jeez.
Yeah, we believe Goliath was probably a 12-footer. Unbelievable.
Okay, L.A., keep in touch with us, huh?
Certainly will, George. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Just a superb update. L.A.'s website, of course, linked up for you at coasttocoastam.com. And when we come back in a moment, Bill McDonald joins us. Creature Forensics. Get ready for that on Coast to Coast AM.
Thank you for listening to Coast AM on our official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie, and don't forget to visit the Coast Insider membership area on coasttocoastam.com, where you can access our past, upcoming, and classic shows.